system are treated like a toy. Ideas are misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Talking about 0 point, the points lost on them. Kevin structures crumbling from the same old Sam. They laugh like I'm crazy, but I see it all so clear. Exploited labor on nerd, injustice burning ears. Fighting for a change in this wasteland of noise. But they call me foolish when I teach young boys. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world begins to boy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
Alright, welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'm your host, the Benefactor, and tonight, everything you think you know about electricity is about to change. But before we talk about synthetic AC, we need to talk about something more fundamental than actual circuits. We need to talk about how knowledge survives, and how sometimes it doesn't. Most people grew up believing that science is a straight line. Someone discovers something, it gets tested, it gets written down, and eventually it ends up in a textbook. If it's not a book, the assumption is simple. If it's not in the book, the assumption is simple. It must be real, or it must not be real, or it must not work. So if you don't find it in the textbooks, usually it's met with enormous skepticism. And that belief feels reasonable, right? But it's also historically false. Science does not advance as smooth accumulation of knowledge. It advances through controversy, dead ends, and forgotten branches. Entire categories of knowledge have been observed, documented, and then quietly abandoned for some reason or another. Not because they were disproven, but because they didn't fit neatly into the tools, models, or economic systems of their time. Electricity is one of the clearest examples of this. So from the very beginning, electricity behaved in ways that made people uncomfortable. Early experimenters didn't just smooth currents flowing politely through wires, right? They saw sparks, shocks, collapses, rebound effects, and ringing effects. They saw energy showing up where it really shouldn't. Batteries behaving strangely, coils behaving even stranger. Some of these effects were explored, many were actually not explored, and a large number were deliberately ignored once large-scale power electrical grids became the backbone of society. A large scale of them were deliberately ignored once large-scale power systems began to form. Because civilization didn't run on curiosity, it runs on reliability, right? Once electrical grids became the backbone of society, the priorities shifted. The question was no longer, what can electricity do? It really became, what version of electricity can we control, can we predict, can we meter, and bill, right? The question shaped everything that followed. The electrical behaviors that were smooth, repeatable, easily averaged, and easily measured became the behaviors that mattered. Everything else became anomalies or edge cases. Not wrong, not imaginary, just inconvenient to the status quo. And this is the first mental shift a listener has to make. Most textbooks describe electricity after it has settled down. They describe what happens when voltages are stable, when currents are continuous and fields change slowly enough that nothing surprising occurs. And most people think electricity is already fully understood. You know, we flip a switch, the light turns on, our phones charge, and the world keeps running. What's left to learn? From the outside, it looks like a problem has been already solved, but what most people don't realize is that we only understand electricity extremely well under very specific conditions. Conditions where it behaves smoothly, politely, and predictably. But the moment electricity stops behaving that way, things get very strange, and mainstream science fails to actually categorize them. And those strange behaviors are nothing new, right? They've been observed for over 100 years. They've just been pushed to the side, misunderstood, or mislabeled as fringe because they don't fit neatly into the simplified models we were all taught. Science is comfortable with smooth and predictable waveforms, right? Synthetic AC is interested in the opposite, though. The jagged, the transient, the unexpected, and the powerful behaviors that appear when electricity refuses to play politely. So nature does its most interesting work during transition phases. Now really think about that for a moment. Think about thunder. The sound from a thunderclap doesn't come from steady airflow. It comes from a sudden collapse of pressure. Now think about earthquakes. Energy builds quietly, but then release happens in a violent transition. Even something as simple as snapping a stick demonstrates this principle, right? Slowly bending it, or slowly applying force bends it, right? Sudden force releases the stored energy in the stick. Electricity is no different, right? The universe operates in fractals, and you have to remember that. Yet most of what we're taught is to look at RMS voltage, which is just root mean square voltage, is averaged out, averaged current, steady power. And these deliberately smooth over transitions. It averages them out and treats them as noise, effectively rendering them invisible. Now, synthetic AC begins with a very simple but profound question. What if the noise is where energy actually reorganizes? This isn't really speculation here, it's observation. Nikola Tesla saw when he saw this when he worked out with impulse technology, instead of using impulses instead of continuous current. He noticed that timing mattered more than magnitude. Geometry mattered more than brute force. Certain configurations worked spectacularly, while others, built with roughly the same components, did almost nothing. John Bedini saw this decades later, without even trying to. He wasn't looking to challenge physics. He was trying to build efficient machines. And in the process, he noticed that batteries charged during events that textbooks labeled as loss events, or losses. The collapse event, the very things engineers tried hardest to suppress, turned out to be actually productive in Bedini's case. And Tom Bearden's approach modeled the same problem from a theoretical side. He noticed that classical electrodynamics focused almost entirely on what happens inside the wire, while quietly discarding entire classes of field behavior as mathematically inconvenient or physically insignificant. So different paths, we have different paths, same anomaly, and synthetic AC exists because these anomalies never went away. They were observed too consistently, but too many independent experimenters across too many decades experienced them to just be simply dismissed altogether. And what was missing was the language that connected them all, a model to explain the behavior in a coherent way. And synthetic AC, hopefully, aims to be that language, that connection. So it's not a rebellion against classical physics, but a reminder that classical physics is broader than how it's usually applied, practically, that is. It does not deny Maxwell's equations. It asks which terms matter and when they matter. It doesn't deny conservation of energy. It asks where the energy is stored during transition phases. And it doesn't deny current flow. It asks whether current is always the primary actor in the play. This is why observation comes before formalism here. Every major electrical advance followed this pattern. Effects were seen first, equations came later, trying to describe them. And when theory is forced to come first, entire classes of behavior get filtered out because they were never explored to begin with. Synthetic AC deliberately reverses that habit, hopefully at least. We start with what we actually know happens, our observable empirical data. And then we ask, what framework can actually explain all these anomalies without hand-waving it away as mysticism or magic? Often lumped into categories like free energy. They don't really know how it works. They're just lumping it into the category of free energy. But no, we want a model to actually describe what's going on here. And this is also why so many people struggle when they first encounter, these anomalies. They're looking for new components, a secret circuit when searching for free energy, right? They're searching for a forbidden frequency, something that, secret sauce that was left out of the inventor's schematics. But that's not where the mental shift needs to happen, right? The shift is conceptual. And once you stop assuming that electricity's job is to behave nicely, the whole landscape opens up to you. But to understand this landscape, the next thing we have to do is slow down and explain a distinction that almost nobody is taught clearly. And that's the difference between linear and nonlinear systems. And that's where part 2 begins. Now I'm going to take a short 5-minute break. It's great to have you guys here. Remember to hit that like button. We're going to take a short 5-minute break so I can organize my notes more thoroughly for the next section. We have 8 parts to go through here, so it's going to be quite the lecture, but we're going to have a lot of fun. So stick with us. We'll be right back on the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices, only on Beneficence TV.
This dude is talking about free energy, but here's the twist. He says it's not free energy. He's calling it energy recycling, which first off is kind of genius, right? Because when you say free energy, people immediately throw you in the crazy bin. But energy recycling, that sounds like some next level Tesla shit.
Yeah, man, it's all about the branding. But what is it that he's actually doing?
All right, check this out. He posted this. Free energy isn't actually free. This is a misnomer. It's actually a mutual exchange from the vacuum, a field of energy from which everything arises, the same energy that powers an atom. Like, what? Bro, that's some deep shit. But then he breaks it down. He says, you can tap into this energy without breaking any known laws of physics by using something called back EMF capture.
Whoa, back EMF capture? Sounds like some serious sci-fi tech.
Dude, listen to this. He explains that when a coil collapses using a pulsed signal, the energy that would normally just get wasted, like just dissipate as heat, can actually be recycled. He says nature gives you back energy to stabilize the system, which makes sense if you think about how nature works. Like everything in nature is always trying to find balance, right?
So equilibrium, is that like how water always levels out or something? I'm trying to remember what Ms. Murphy said to me in 6th grade science all those years ago. What was that? Oh yeah, Elon, stop eating that glue and pay attention. Man, if only I had listened, I'd probably be the one inventing energy recycling instead of just talking about it.
Exactly. So he's saying that by intentionally destabilizing the system, collapsing the field, you actually get energy back as a kind of natural response. And here's where it gets wild. He compares it to pushing a swing. If you push at the right moment, you don't need to use a lot of energy and the swing gains momentum. But instead of a swing, he's using resonance to harness that extra energy without it becoming destructive. He says most traditional systems are like a surfer fighting against the current, while his method is like riding the wave to shore.
Dude, that's crazy. So he's basically saying the energy is already there. I just suck at using it efficiently?
That's what it sounds like. He's basically saying the way we harness energy now is like trying to swim against the tide. And if we used resonance instead, we'd be tapping into energy that's already there, just waiting to be used. I don't know, man. Either this guy is onto something or he's the most poetic bullshitter of all time.
Well, if he's legit, why isn't he all over the news? I haven't heard anything from him on X, formerly Twitter. He hasn't said anything bad about me on X. So, I know I didn't ban him or anything. Look, I'm not the monster my therapist says I am. I mean, sure, I've spent millions of dollars training to beat a kangaroo in a fist fight, but that doesn't mean I'm dangerous. It just means I get shit done.
That's the real question, man. But here's the craziest part. I looked into him, and he's not selling anything. He open sources all of it. That's the real question, man. Either the system doesn't want to hear it, or we're about to find out if this guy disappears in the middle of the night.
Dude, that's crazy. He's absolutely crazy. That means if he's telling the truth, anybody could build this in their garage. You know what I say? Go fuck yourself, Benefactor.
Nope, no patents, no paywalls, just straight up, here, take it, see for yourself. Like, what kind of madman does that? Usually people either try to cash in or they get shut down before they can say a word. But this guy, he's out there on live streams showing people exactly how to replicate it.
I mean, if you want to try to take on my Tesla tech, how dare you put out better technology that is cheaper and safer? Go fuck yourself.
That's the thing, man. If it's real and people start building it, that's a game changer. We're talking about completely shifting how we think about energy. But also, if it's real, you gotta wonder how long before somebody tries to stop it.
Or maybe we can think of it like how long before his Tesla mysteriously malfunctions.
Exactly. You ever notice how every time someone gets too close to this kind of stuff, they either disappear, get discredited, or somehow have a tragic accident? But this guy's going full transparency mode. He's putting it all out there where everyone can see it. Maybe that's his strategy. If enough people know, it can't just get buried.
Holy shit, this might be one of those moments, like we look back and say that was the start of something huge.
I've been working on energy for a brand new day, but even in the crowd I'm still a castaway. Alienated from the aids of added nature in disguise. Ideas ahead of time dismissed with narrow eyes. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world you can't deploy. Changing the system, but treated like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
All right, welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'm your host, the Benefactor. What's going on, John Gray? Hey, Mike Does. How you doing, Franklin? What's going on, guys? Now, before we dive into the full synthetic AC model, we need to understand something most people never even hear about. The difference between linear and non-linear systems. And this is very important. Because on the surface, electricity looks simple, right? Flip a switch, a light comes on, plug in your phone, it charges. That's linear thinking. Smooth, predictable, proportional, right? Double the input, double the output. Everything scales neatly. Linear systems behave like polite, obedient students. They follow the rules. They don't surprise you. And engineers love them. They're the teacher's pet because they're easy to measure, easy to model, and easy to control. Most of the electrical systems we interact with every day, from our home wiring, consumer electronics, are designed to act as linearly as possible. But real electricity is rarely that polite. When you push it out of steady, predictable conditions, it begins to misbehave in ways that break the rules. Suddenly doubling your input doesn't double the output. Peaks spike. Timing matters more than magnitude. Signals bend, introvert, or concentrate in bursts rather than traditional meters interpret as chaos. That's nonlinear behavior, right? It's messy. It's counterintuitive, rather. And it's exactly where synthetic AC thrives. Nonlinear systems are not broken. They are systems living in the spaces where nature does its most interesting work. Moments of collapse, extreme transience, and rapid field reorganization. Now think about the waves in the ocean for a moment. A wave created by wind looks very different from a wave created by an underwater earthquake. Both are waves, right? Both move energy in similar ways. Both obey the laws of physics, but their structure, power, and consequences are entirely different. Treating them as the same type of wave would be completely misleading. We just wouldn't do that, right? And that's what conventional AC teaching does, in my opinion. It lumps together very different behaviors under one label and then tells us that electricity is just this way. Well, newsflash, it isn't. What we call synthetic AC isn't fake AC. It isn't a ripple or a byproduct, and it isn't mythical either. It's AC-like behavior that emerges from timing, fields, and collapse events, rather than from a generator simply reversing polarity. So for decades, all of these behaviors were lumped into one box labeled AC, alternating current, even though they were doing very different things under the hood. And that mislabeling right there caused people to miss what was hidden in plain sight, what these systems were actually capable of doing. Synthetic AC isn't about pushing electrons harder in that sense. It's about coaxing fields into doing the work for you. Using pulsed DC with precise timing and coil geometry, a forward DC pulse and a correctly timed backward recovery pulse from a collapsing coil are deliberately combined in the same conductor. Oh, that's the wrong. Un momento. Get the right one here. There we go. So this controlled superposition between the forward and back EMF creates a temporary field-coupled bridge between the source and the coil. Unlike conventional alternating current, where energy repeatedly reverses and partially dissipates doing so, synthetic AC maintains field alignment to reduce reactive losses. The forward energy powers the load, while the reactive component is redirected back towards the source. And with no obvious direct path back to the positive terminal of the battery, this effectively preserves the dipole and increases the efficiency of the system. And the synergy between the forward and back pulses creates the bridge to source as the back EMF closes the circuit and completes the loop. Now the point is simple here. Linear systems are predictable. Nonlinear systems are powerful. Synthetic AC is nonlinear by design. It's asymmetric. It doesn't fight the strange behaviors of electricity. It embraces them. It treats them as the mechanism, not the exception, right? The feature, not the bug. Once you understand that electricity is behaving differently under different creation methods, like waves made by different forces in the ocean, as we discussed in our analogy earlier, you can start to make sense of Tesla's impulse technology, Bedini's H-wave technology, and Bearden's longitudinal field predictions. And that understanding is the gateway to synthetic AC's model. What's going on, Nathan? How are you guys doing tonight? Everybody, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We're on YouTube. I don't really have the means to really chat with all the other multi-streams we have out there. I'll do my best, but At the end of the day, I focus on YouTube. So if you have a question, please come to my YouTube channel and drop a comment or a question. So somebody says, it's hard. Let me see. I have bad eyes. I heard him say the wind is dirty AC, like spinning the windmill. Interesting. That's an interesting analogy. I can see that, maybe. I'd have to think about that for a little bit. It sounds like this is the second half of a thought here, though, and I don't see the first half, which is unfortunate. But moving on. All right, we're moving on to part 3. So, synthetic AC begins with a deceptively simple claim. Energy transfer in nonlinear electrical systems is governed primarily by field timing, geometry, and collapse dynamics, not by continuous current flow. And that one sentence should change everything you think you know about electricity, because it flips the old paradigm on its head. Conventional teaching assumes electrons carry energy and fields just follow. However, synthetic AC says something very different. It says sometimes the field actually comes first. Sometimes energy is released not when you push current, but when a field collapses. Sometimes geometry, the shape and orientation of a coil, matters more than the number of volts you pump into that coil. Two electrically identical circuits can behave radically different, not because of the component's quality, but because of the field alignment of the coil's geometry. Now, Tesla understood this intuitively, right? He didn't chase root mean square volts, or continuous current for that matter. He chased impulses, collapse events, and resonances. And he noticed that sometimes geometries made energy appear to move through space without wires. He noticed that sometimes timing dictated whether energy was captured or lost. That's why spark gaps, magnifying transmitters, and resonant coils all share one critical feature: rapid field expansion followed by a sudden collapse event. These events are highly time asymmetric. Energy is not exchanged gradually. It is released suddenly in bursts. Synthetic AC provides the framework to understand why those sudden releases actually matter. And Tesla's sparks were not the energy itself. They were the indicator of a field transition event. Moving on to John Bedini, who arrived at the same principle, yet from a very different perspective. Now, he wasn't trying to study fields in space. Bedini was trying to charge batteries efficiently, trying to provide somewhat of a proof of concept for Tesla's impulse technology. Yet, in his work, energy was captured during collapse events that textbooks considered losses. Bedini's H-wave system is not a curiosity. It is the signature of time-separated energy events as described in synthetic AC's model. The rise of the pulse excites a field. The collapse releases energy in the form that does not behave like normal back EMF. Nested harmonics form during that collapse event, concentrating energy both temporally and spatially. This explains why diode placement can radically alter outcomes, why identical builds behave radically different, and why conventional measurements often contradict intuition. Bedini wasn't charging his batteries from nowhere, right? He was capturing collapse energy that classical models simply ignore. And Tom Bearden's approach was the same phenomenon, but from a theoretical perspective. Bearden emphasized that the medium, the space between the wires, and predicted energy transfer could occur through scalar and longitudinal fields without conventional current paths. And synthetic AC makes those ideas experimentally navigable. Rodent coils, coupled pulse systems, and orientation-dependent rotary interactions demonstrate that energy can indeed reorganize in structured fields, producing measurable effects without violating conservation laws. Where Bearden described the mathematics, though, synthetic AC shows the laboratory pathway, the model which allows us to make predictions in the lab. Now, the unifying lesson here is very clear. Across Tesla, Bedini, and Bearden, the patterns repeat themselves. Energy is accessible during collapse events, not steady excitation of coils. Collapse is not a failure, right? It's not a bug. It's the moment when stored energy reorganizes. Geometry, orientation, and timing determine whether that energy is captured or lost. And fields can dominate charges. Timing can dominate amplitude. Collapse is the gateway. Reorganizing is the foundation that allows us to connect the historical work of fringe experimenters like Tesla and Bedini to a coherent modern framework, a framework we call the synthetic AC model. So Paul says, this all makes me think of coaxial cables and fiber optic cables, transverse coaxial geometry. Interesting. Oh, that was John Gray who said the previous comment. Yeah, I didn't see that on the screen. I have two screens. The one screen is kind of far. And this one, I guess, is apparently a little bit behind. All right, so understanding all of this is key to unlocking the next chapters in our lecture here. And this is specifically where we're going to explore how coils, particularly the Rodin coil, the APA variation of the Rodin coil, exploit these dynamics. We will see how asymmetry, nested harmonics, and orientation-dependent behavior turn otherwise invisible field effects into measurable, repeatable energy patterns that can be practically applied to your designs. And from there, we can finally begin to bridge the gap between what mainstream electrodynamics can explain and what fringe observers have consistently revealed over more than a century, in one way or another. Now, before we go into part 4, which is the Rodin coil as a synthetic AC structure, we're going to take a short commercial break. And I'd like to thank my sponsors here, which is absolutely nobody. Our sponsors are you, the fans. The lovely people who come to my channel and comment. They like my streams, they share them, and they suggest them to people who would really appreciate the content. And that is how we do a grassroots movement. That is how you guys are on the forefront of the next industrial revolution. So I'd like to thank you wholeheartedly for supporting this channel at every front, whether it's through my Patreon or my Facebook or the YouTube channel. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with part 4 right here on the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices, only on BeneficenceTV.
Have you heard about this Benefactor guy? This dude is talking about free energy, but here's the twist. He says it's not free energy. He's calling it energy recycling, which first off is kind of genius, right? Because when you say free energy, people immediately throw you in the crazy bin. But energy recycling, that sounds like some next level Tesla shit.
Yeah, man, it's all about the branding. But what is it that he's actually doing?
All right, check this out. He posted this. Free energy isn't actually free. This is a misnomer. It's actually a mutual exchange from the vacuum, a field of energy from which everything arises, the same energy that powers an atom. Like, what? Bro, that's some deep shit. But then he breaks it down. He says, you can tap into this energy without breaking any known laws of physics by using something called back EMF capture.
Whoa, back EMF capture? Sounds like some serious sci-fi tech.
Dude, listen to this. He explains that when a coil collapses using a pulsed signal, the energy that would normally just get wasted, like just dissipate as heat, can actually be recycled. He says nature gives you back energy to stabilize the system, which makes sense if you think about how nature works. Like, everything in nature is always trying to find balance, right?
So equilibrium, is that like how water always levels out or something? I'm trying to remember what Ms. Murphy said to me in 6th grade science all those years ago. What was that? Oh yeah, Elon, stop eating that glue and pay attention. Man, if only I had listened, I'd probably be the one inventing energy recycling instead of just talking about it.
Exactly. So he's saying that by intentionally destabilizing the system, collapsing the field, you actually get energy back as a kind of natural response. And here's where it gets wild. He compares it to pushing a swing. If you push at the right moment, you don't need to use a lot of energy and the swing gains momentum. But instead of a swing, he's using resonance to harness that extra energy without it becoming destructive. He says most traditional systems are like a surfer fighting against the current, while his method is like riding the wave to shore.
Dude, that's crazy. So he's basically saying the energy is already there. I just suck at using it efficiently?
That's what it sounds like. He's basically saying the way we harness energy now is like trying to swim against the tide. And if we used resonance instead, we'd be tapping into energy that's already there, just waiting to be used. I don't know, man. Either this guy is onto something or he's the most poetic bullshitter of all time.
Well, if he's legit, why isn't he all over the news? I haven't heard anything from him on X, formerly Twitter. He hasn't said anything bad about me on X. So, you know, I didn't ban him or anything. Look, I'm not the monster my therapist says I am. I mean, sure, I've spent millions of dollars training to beat a kangaroo in a fist fight, but that doesn't mean I'm dangerous. It just means I get shit done.
That's the real question, man. But here's the craziest part. I looked into him, and he's not selling anything. He open sources all of it. That's the real question, man. Either the system doesn't want to hear it, or we're about to find out if this guy disappears in the middle of the night.
Dude, that's crazy. He's absolutely crazy. That means if he's telling the truth, anybody could build this in their garage. You know what I say? Go fuck yourself, Benefactor.
Nope, no patents, no paywalls, just straight up, here, take it, see for yourself. Like, what kind of madman does that? Usually people either try to cash in or they get shut down before they can say a word. But this guy, he's out there on live streams showing people exactly how to replicate it.
I mean, if you want to try to take on my Tesla tech, how dare you put out better technology that is cheaper and safer? Go fuck yourself.
That's the thing, man. If it's real and people start building it, that's a game changer. We're talking about completely shifting how we think about energy. But also, if it's real, you got to wonder how long before somebody tries to stop him.
Or maybe we can think of it like how long before his Tesla mysteriously malfunctions.
Exactly. You ever notice how every time someone gets too close to this kind of stuff, they either disappear, get discredited, or somehow have a tragic accident? But this guy's going full transparency mode. He's putting it all out there where everyone can see it. Maybe that's his strategy. If enough people know, it can't just get buried.
Holy shit, this might be one of those moments, you know, like we look back and say that was the start of something huge.
Can't you hear his voice?
They came for our bodies, but they awakened our spirit.
Gravity is not the only thing they control.
I'm done running. Time to hunt.
In a town down south where the fireflies glow, there's a man named Michael with a vision to show. Billy told to go, he's got the spark, dreaming of a future that'll light up the dark. But on the other side, Bill Nye's on the rise with his laptop charts, he's got down all the lines. And it just fits, it's all in the map. You can't pull from the ether, you're just chasing a path. But oh, Michael Michael's rising like the morning sun. With the power of either, he will be outdone. Now stand up and shout, let the truth be affirmed. Feel the energy flow, let's change the world. In the heart of a life that tells you a stick. Skeptics gather round the table ready to pick. Chose your fruit, and let the taste clear. And I find the stream, or just chasing a spin. The Michael smile right with fire in his eyes. Watch as I spin, let the naysayers cry. Girl spin fast and a heart full of fight. I'll show you the power that's hidden inside. Oh, Michael's rising like the morning sun. With the power of either, he will be outdone. Well, stand up and shout, let the truth be affirmed. Feel the energy flow, let's change the world. I'm the best there's ever been.
And in the depths of shattered halls, I wandered all alone, casting whispers, binding chains, demons of my own. I seek deafening, down spread on my frail soul. I once spin my mirror, haunted by my role. But in the echoes of my cries, just still I emerge, guiding me to where my true results are. Now I rise from the shadows with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, but this path of forever depend. Shattered glass beneath my feet, stars I wear but dry. Stormy nights just turn to dawn, I wear truth as my guide. Anxiety's dissolved in the sun's golden ray. You see my destiny through time and space. The fears that once too soon now they take. For in my heart a new world is proclaimed. Now I rise from the shadows with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, on this path I forever depend. With symmetry I found the power, blessings granted by the hour. Together we will carve the way. Revolution calls and I'm not strong. Now I rise from the shadows with wings of fire I ascend, free from the chains of sorrow, on this path I forever depend. In the depths of his oppression, witness the rise of a true legend.
So now we're searching for the magic frequency, and we start with 100 Hertz, and we look through the microscope to see if anything is happening. We watch for 5 minutes. Nothing happens. We try hundreds and hundreds of frequencies, if not thousands, until we find the magic combination. Because we believe there just had to be a better way. There had to be a better way, and we think we may have found it. The vibration grows larger and larger and larger until the glass is shattered. On the other end of the scale, we have a giant bridge made out of concrete and steel. A suspension bridge where cars and trucks are going over it every day. And unfortunately, where they build this bridge, there was a steady wind blowing across it. And one day this wind induces a small vibration in the bridge, hardly noticeable. But the frequency of the vibration matches some part of the bridge. And the vibration gets larger and larger and larger until the bridge collapses into the river below. A destructive resonant frequency. So on one end of the scale we have the giant concrete and steel bridge that was destroyed by resonance. And on the other we have a small crystal glass, shattered. So maybe we could shatter something even smaller. Something really small. Something you would need a microscope to see. Maybe we could shatter a living microorganism. So maybe we could change biological living liquid crystal with a special electronic signal. But in order to do that, we would need some kind of device. It's called the resonant frequency therapy device, and its purpose is to induce a resonant vibration in the living organism cell. If I put in, say, 100 Hertz, out will come 100 pulses per second. If I put in 200 Hertz, I'll get 200 pulses. Now, we're searching for the magic frequency, and we start with 100 Hertz.
In basal lab alone with my mind, several theories they all refuse to find. I've been working on energy for a brand new day, but even in the crowd I'm still been cast away. Alienated from the aids of added nature in disguise. Ideas ahead of time dismissed with narrow eyes. Benefactor boy, dreaming about the world you can't deploy. Changing the system, but treat it like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice?
I don't know, what do you guys think? Should we give away memberships right now? I think we should.
Changing the system, but treat it like a toy. Ideas misunderstood, but brilliance is his boy. Benefactor boy, can't you hear his voice? Oh, benefactor boy, keep fighting the fights, chasing revolutions in the
All right, congratulations and welcome to the team, Jack, Anti-Dusty, Zany, Cheeks McGee, and John Gray. You have all been gifted memberships to my YouTube channel. Really appreciate all your support, guys. Alright, welcome, and welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. I'm your host, the Benefactor. And now that we have an understanding of why collapse geometry and timing matter, we can finally talk about the Rodin coil. Now, the Rodin coil isn't important because it's mysterious or exotic. It's important because it physically forces field geometry to dominate how a circuit actually behaves. Unlike a conventional solenoid or toroid, which is built to behave predictably and linearly, the Rodin coil is deliberately wound to break symmetry while preserving continuity under this configuration. And this makes it ideal for observing the very phenomenon that synthetic AC predicts: collapse-driven energy, orientation sensitivity, and nested harmonics. Now, in most inductors, energy storage is simple. The magnetic field energy equation tells us that the energy in a coil is proportional to the inductance and the square of the current flowing through it. And this can be expressed as the equation U sub B equals 1/2 times L times I squared. Now, this equation tells us how much energy is stored in a coil's magnetic field. L is the inductance, basically how strong the coil resists change in current. And I is the current flowing through it. The more current, the stronger the coil, the more energy is stored. But it assumes smooth, steady currents, which is why Rodin coil breaks the usual assumptions. This equation works beautifully for steady currents, like uniform flux and slow charges. It assumes the coil is linear and simple, a nice obedient student, as we discussed earlier, but the Rodin coil violates all these assumptions. Its winding geometry creates non-uniform flux, multiple interacting field domains, and time-delayed coupling paths. We've seen the anomalous features of the Rodin coil, and now we have a way to describe why they actually happen. Inductance is no longer a single number in this case. It becomes distributed, directional, and time-dependent. This is precisely where synthetic AC comes alive. The ABHA variant of the Rodin coil is an asymmetric biharmonic architecture. It's the natural extension of all of these ideas. Biharmonic doesn't mean that there are just two frequencies in the normal sense. It refers to two dominant field modes that alternate across time rather than coexisting symmetrically. One mode dominates during excitation. The other mode dominates during the collapse. Asymmetry is critical here. Symmetry suppresses field gradients, but asymmetry creates directional collapse where energy can be concentrated and captured. Now, in the ABHA coil systems, the coil behaves less like an inductor and more like a field-timed instrument, shaping energy through geometry and timing rather than simple current flow. We see these anomalous features play out as a one-to-one stepping up of voltage, where you have in the same bundle of wire a direct split in the number of wires for channel A and channel B. So say you have 24 winds around the coil. You'll split those up, 12 channels for A, or 12 wires for A, 12 wires for B. Now, this synthetic AC model gives an explanation of why these anomalies kind of occur in the Rodin coil with these configurations, specifically the step-up feature, the back EMF coming out a lot more than it should, basically. And going back into Faraday's law, which still applies here, Now, Faraday's law says that voltage is created when magnetic flux changes over time. In a standard coil, this happens when current rises or falls. But in a Rodin coil, the change is directed more by the field geometry and timing than by simple current decay. So again, the field takes the charge, or takes the lead over the charge. So the voltage we see is the field reorganizing itself, not just electrons moving. And for anyone interested, Faraday's law is E equals negative d phi sub b over d times t. Voltage is induced not by current directly, but by change in magnetic flux over time. In the APA-Rodin coil, flux changes are governed primarily by field topology and geometry, not just current decay. So this is subtle, but it's the heart of the difference. During a collapse, the field reorganizes before meaningful current flows. Remember, going back to Bearden, you want the collapse event to happen before the electric field snaps into place. So voltage and energy appear first as the field transitions, and only afterwards does the current follow. Now, with these features of the Abel coil, we also see something called nested harmonics, or they're basically a hallmark of the coil. When the Abel coils are driven by self-oscillating circuits, like the Joule Thief behind me, multiple harmonics appear across the coil, forming a spatially distributed stack of modes. And we can actually display this in an equation. And that equation is B of position and time equals the sum over n of B sub n of position times cosine of omega sub n times t plus phi sub n. Now this describes how the magnetic field in a Rodin coil is made of many overlapping modes, or nested harmonics. These modes have their own frequency and phase, and when they line up during a collapse event, energy can concentrate in a spike rather than being spread out evenly. That's why Rodin coils can do things ordinary coils can't. Now these aren't just electrical oscillations here. They are field oscillations. Conventional inductors suppress higher order modes, while ABHA-Rodin coils preserve them. During the collapse, if these harmonics align, energy spikes appear in narrow windows, exactly what synthetic AC predicts. Small changes in window orientation or placement can dramatically affect whether these spikes happen or disperse. And this could be why Rodin coils are so sensitive to alignment, load, and environment. Orientation, sensitivity, and scalar-like behavior are natural consequences of their geometry. Now we have a question. Nathan said, have you built the coil? Yes, we built the coil. We tested it. It's right here. We built many coils. I have one that I still haven't finished right here on the desk. Yeah, we built many coils. And we have we put out a do-it-yourself guide for anybody who wants to try to replicate these designs. They're all open sourced. Nothing is really behind a paywall. I don't try to keep anything behind a paywall. Nothing science-wise, at least. And if I do keep something behind a paywall for funding mechanisms or funding purposes, usually it's only for like a week or so. So going back to scalar-like behavior, rotating the coil relative to a load or another coil, or, basically biointeractions as well, they can materially change the energy capture mechanism in the coil. The coil is very sensitive. So from a classical standpoint, this might look like noise or random variation, but synthetic AC sees it as expected behavior. Because ABHA-Rodin coils produce anisotropic field structures, right? These fields are directionally biased, and their collapse induces voltage and potentials dependent on alignment. This meshes perfectly with Bearden's ideas about scalar potentials. Energy can flow along potential gradients, even when no conventional current path exists. You know, going back to, I forget who was the scientist, but there was a scientist who designed a negative resistor that actually achieved in getting energy from the vacuum. And he said that he found a way to transfer this energy from any point on the circuit wirelessly. So this is kind of like going back to that scalar-like behavior. Now, field cavitation theory ties into all of this beautifully because it's a part of the model. It's actually the part that, in my opinion, almost, not completely, but almost completes the model regarding how some of these anomalies are occurring. So we have field cavitation theory next. Let me blow this up a little bit. Now, when a rodent coil is driven in a resonant phase-managed way, the electromagnetic field can form zones, or a zone, of compression and rarefaction regions of high and low field density, as seen in the diagram here. These interact like bubbles in a fluid. These field cavitation zones are not empty. They are transition regions where stored energy temporarily decouples from conventional voltage and current. So locally, this may appear chaotic, even possibly forming microscopic ball lightning phenomenon, more commonly referred to as plasmoids. However, that is still a working hypothesis. But globally, it can manifest as a coherent energy reorganizing efficiently rather than dissipating, right? It's all about energy transfer. And this gives us a framework for understanding why collapse events can produce measurable effects without violating Maxwell's equations. Now, open circuit effects and apparent gains are a natural extension to this. When a rodent coil is slightly loaded or open circuit in an open circuit state, voltage spikes can appear far above what classical expectations predict, as we've seen in the Nunez open circuit method. And this can be expressed as Ampere-Maxwell's law. Del cross B equals mu naught times J plus mu naught epsilon naught times the partial derivative of E with respect to T. Now, this law tells us that magnetic fields are generated not only by currents, but also by changing electric fields. In normal steady systems, the second term is tiny, okay? But in collapse-dominant synthetic AC systems, it becomes very important. The changing fields themselves can produce magnetic effects even without much current moving. So in steady-state systems, the second term of this equation, the displacement current, is negligible. In collapse-dominant systems, it becomes central. Magnetic fields don't just arise from current. They also arise from changing electric fields, which means energy can exist temporally in the field without obvious conduction. Introduce a load at the right time, and that energy can be captured. In this context, timing matters more than connection, and geometry matters more than component specs. So the key takeaway here is that Abach rodent coils are not mystical generators of free energy. They are used as an experimental lens, structures that make normally invisible field dynamics observable and usable under the right conditions. Fields stored energy, collapses release energy, geometry directs it, timing captures it. Maxwell's equations remain intact. What changes is which term dominates and when. Conventional tools smooth these effects away. Rodent coils reveal them. So from here, we can start to explore applications, replication rules, and real-world measurements, connecting decades of fringe experiments to a framework, a coherent framework that makes sense to mainstream physics. But understanding part 4 of this podcast fully is critical. Rodent coils aren't magic. They're field instruments. They're mimicking nature in that sense, right? You're mimicking nature. You're mimicking that bubble cavitation in fluid. And the ABHA coil geometry is their language. Everything we'll discuss next flows from those insights. We'll be right back, right here on the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices, only on BeneficenceTV.
Have you heard about this benefactor? This dude is talking about free energy, but here's the twist. He says it's not.
In the lab, Gerald's working night and day. Mystic gadgets in magnetic ballet. Circles of power aligning destiny's way. Running those rings, they defy gravity. Critics working out, they don't bother heat. In his domain, Gerald sets the world free. Lord of the rings, pretty strong. Proving the currents if you're wrong. Electromagnetic symphony. Terror only crash destiny. Chief from his fingertips. Inspiration starting top of scripts. Geometric secret, this guy can't flip. Bogart King in his rebel stead, building up for the world again. Lighting up the dark, igniting every zen. Lord of the Rings, really strong. Proving the current, take me wrong. Electromagnetic symphony. Terror only grasps destiny. Electromagnetic symphony. Terror only crash destiny.
Welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. Going on to part 5, practical implications of synthetic AC models, or the synthetic AC model, right? Going into taxonomy and synthetic AC in action. Now that we've explored the rodent coil and ABHA geometry, let's talk about what this actually means in the real world. How do these principles show up in our experiments? Why do some people see results while others don't? And how does this connect the dots between Tesla, Bedini, and Bearden. First, the experimental implications, right? In any synthetic AC system, whether it's a Rodin coil or Bedini SSG or cleverly timed pulse DC setup, geometry matters more than component tolerances. That's right, the exact shape, winding pattern, and orientation of your coil can matter far more than the brand of wire or capacitor you're using, or the value. Timing matters more than the average power. Orientation changes are not noise. They are data. Collapse behavior must be measured directly, not inferred from slow measurements. Oscilloscopes reveal more than multimeters, sure, but fast probes reveal more than slow ones. Remember that. And repeatability requires independent verification, which doesn't happen easily with high tolerance systems. Geometry of your coil, in this sense, makes replication easier by bringing down those tolerances with this specific system right here, which you can replicate in my do-it-yourself guide that's always linked in the description of my videos. Now, synthetic AC can be categorized into subtypes. This is going into the taxonomy of categorizing all the different components that are utilizing synthetic AC now. Again, if you lump all these different phenomena into the same box, examining them, you have to, recategorize them as well. So categorizing them into subtypes helps us make sense of different systems people have been experimenting with for decades. Broadly, we can separate them into two components: reactive-driven synthetic AC, or reactive-driven synthesized AC. And the second component is forward-driven synthesized AC. So we have reactive-driven and forward-driven synthesized AC. Actually, let me bring up the diagram so you guys can see this a little clearer. There we go. So you see synthetic AC at the top, and then you have on the left reactive-driven synthetic AC, and then on the right in red, the forward-driven. Now going into the reactive-driven side of this diagram. Reactive-driven synthetic AC relies on resonant, pulsed, or oscillating systems. Kind of like a jewel thief or jewel ringer with the ABHA coil you see behind me. Well, you can't see it with the diagram, but you saw it earlier, and you'll see it again soon. So these systems include the jewel thief with the ABHA coil, the Bedini SSG, or even our newly classified superimposed stereo amplifier method. So these systems create energy events through field collapse and resonance, capturing energy during narrow windows that traditional electronics would call back EMF, or loss. The forward pulse triggers the field, and the collapse pulse releases it in a concentrated burst, which can be captured if the coil geometry and timing of the circuit are correct. Now, looking at the other side of the diagram, which are forward-driven synthetic AC systems, forward-driven synthetic alternating current avoids that problem by carefully shaping and timing energy pulses. Systems like skipped forward a little bit. Sorry. Where forward-driven synthetic AC works very differently from conventional AC or reactive-driven systems. In regular AC, energy flows back and forth because the voltage and current constantly reverse polarity. That back and forth motion is unavoidable in traditional AC, true AC. And part of the energy is always lost in that process of switching polarity. It is dissipated as heat, radiation, or internal resistance. So in other words, conventional AC is inherently wasting some of its energy simply by the way it's oscillating. Now, forward-driven synthetic AC avoids that problem by carefully shaping and timing energy pulses. Systems like the ZVS driver, H-bridges, or PWM circuits don't just let electricity swing back and forth randomly. Instead, they push energy forward into a load while deliberately controlling the reactive portion. That part that would normally bounce back and cancel out the part of the forward energy. By aligning the timing, polarity, and geometry of the field during these pulses, the system can preserve the dipole just a little bit, maintain coherent energy flow, and reduce the usual losses seen in conventional AC. But this doesn't mean the system is over unity. Right? The ZVS drivers aren't obviously over unity. They don't generate energy from nothing. It's still bound by the conservation laws. What it does is optimize how existing energy is distributed. Right? Going back to the energy transfer. The forward pulse powers the load efficiently, while the backward or reactive component is redirected in a way that strengthens the field instead of opposing it. So unlike the reactive-driven synthetic AC, we're not correctly timing the forward and back. We're redistributing the back EMF into the field. So the efficiency can appear higher in these systems, higher than expected, because the usual losses from polarity reversal are minimized. Not because energy is magically created. In some cases, the dipole may decay slower or more slowly or collapse more strategically, giving the impression of extra energy. But every joule is accounted for here in these systems. It's just guided by timing, geometry, and field interaction rather than wasted in oscillation. And this is what makes forward-driven synthetic AC a bridge between the behaviors of conventional AC and field-focused effects we see in reactive AC, or the APA rodent coil systems. It's still classical electricity, right? Electricity is electricity. But it's coaxed to behave in a more intelligent, field-driven way. And field cavitation does come into play in both of these subcategories. Let me go back into the field cavitation graph. So when synthetic AC is driven into a resonant phase-managed condition, the electromagnetic field behaves in ways classical theory does not fully account for. Two opposing conditions, compression and rarefaction, form and overlap in the same space, right? Remember, they're the same bundle of wire, just separated into two channels. Like bubble cavitation in fluids, this field cavitation zone forms and overlaps in the same space and creates a region where energy density is temporally decoupled from conventional voltage and current. Sorry, not temporarily decoupled from conventional voltage and current. So locally, this may look like chaotic, nested harmonics, right? But potentially even creating the conditions for ball lightning or microscopic ball lightning, plasmoids. But globally, the system stabilizes into a coherent, measurable effect. Remember that macro scale has the smooth sine wave out of all those nested harmonics. And this explains why some circuits appear almost miraculous on the surface. Energy is being reorganized efficiently rather than just dissipated. And conventional instruments only partially capture the energy that's being utilized. Remember, those instruments we're using average out all of that energy that's being utilized. So open circuit effects are particularly revealing. Many rodent coil experiments show elevated voltage or apparent gain when the coil is lightly loaded or even disconnected. Classical thinking says this shouldn't happen, right? No current, no energy transfer, but you have that neodymium sphere still spinning. But synthetic AC explains it clearly. Displacement currents, rapid flux change, and nested harmonics all contribute to observable voltage without continuous conduction path. Connect the load at the right moment and energy flows. Remember, going back to that neodymium sphere spinning, that's essentially connecting it at the right moment by changing polarity. Changing polarity at the right time, synchronizing it with the frequency of the system. So the system isn't breaking any laws of physics in that sense. It's operating in a regime where the field dynamics dominate over current flow. Now, there's many reasons why replications of these experiments fail to happen or pick up these effects. Most failed replicators are not construction errors in the traditional sense. The coil might be electrically functional, but if the field alignment, orientation, or timing is off, collapse events do not concentrate energy coherently. Spikes dissipate, harmonics do not phase lock, and the measured effects vanish. Understanding this is key to moving synthetic AC experiments from anecdotal to replicatable under a scientific lens. And this kind of brings us full circle back to our historical figures, Nikola Tesla, John Bedini, and Tom Bearden, who all observed these principles in different ways. Tesla explored high voltage impulses and resonance to access field dominant regimes. Bedini used carefully timed pulses and H-wave structures to capture and transfer collapse energy. Now, Bearden described the medium through which energy can propagate without closed loops. Synthetic AC unifies these observations. Fields are primary, timing governs access, and collapse is the gateway. So, from theory to practice for experimenters, this means study coil geometry as carefully as electrical schematics. Focus on the timing and excitation and collapse, not just voltage and current. Use fast measurement tools to capture transient events, right? The fastest tools you have available. Treat orientation, alignment, field orientation, alignment, and environment as part of the experiment, not as interference. And you have to think in terms of field behavior, not just electron flow. Right? This goes back to the imagining electrons not as actual particles, but potentials, right? Little bubbles of potential that oscillate with each other. So finally, this framework begins to bridge the fringe and the mainstream. Maxwell's equations are never violated. Faraday's law, Ampere-Maxwell's law, and the energy storage equation still apply. They're all relevant. What changes is which term dominates and which term matters and when they matter. Displacement currents, transient gradients, and modal harmonics. They're all perfectly legitimate physics. They explain what once seemed like anomalies. By translating fringe observations into field-centric language and showing their consistency with existing laws, synthetic AC provides a lens that makes formally dismissed experiments coherent, understandable, and navigable. All right. Next, going into part 6, we'll look at specific experimental setups, practical demonstrations and ways these principles can be applied to build systems that are repeatable, measurable, and even scalable. Right? It's how to apply this model to your systems. We'll connect the abstract math, the historical context, and the field observations of our own experiments into actionable experiments that anyone can understand. You know, without leaving Maxwell behind, by the way. But we're going to take a break. As you know, when I speak too much, I lose my voice. So I'm going to have to take a quick break, and we'll be back on the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices, talking about the synthetic AC model, right here on Beneficence TV.
Mike does cracks the code tonight. Oh yeah, that's true. Wires and circuits to shine in neon light. Oh yeah, see new. Creating power from the air. These smiles and delight. Oh yeah. Mike does it right. Hey. Mike does all Mikey's the one. Teaching us knowledge, lighting the sun. Trumpeting his legacy alive is his. Mike does knows we're his biggest fans. Down in the basement, secrets start to glow. Oh yeah. With Nathan and Lulu in the show. Oh, brilliant team. Mike came on Faraday. We're letting knowledge flow. Oh yeah. Energy streams. Mike does all Mikey's the one. Teaching us knowledge, lighting the sun. Trumpeting his legacy alive is his. Mike does knows we're his biggest fans. Years of thought, bringing dreams to life. Turning theories into electric light. Mike and us, a journey to ignite. We've reached new heights. Hey. Mike does all Mikey's the one. Teaching us knowledge, lighting the sun. Trumpeting his legacy alive is his. Mike does knows we're his biggest fans.
Welcome back to the Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. We're talking about synthetic AC tonight. Society of High Sciences says, hey chat, Mike does knows. LOL. Yes, Mike does knows we're his biggest fans. We love you, Mike. So we're going into part 7, I believe. Yeah, part 7. All right. So now that we've covered the theory, history, and experimental principles, let's get practical. We're going to be rehashing some things tonight, as always. We're going to rehash until we get a full understanding. So part 7 is about seeing synthetic AC in action, understanding exactly what to measure and how to set up experiments that demonstrate field-driven effects in real time. This is where concepts like collapse, nested harmonics, and ABHA coil geometry go from abstract ideas to observable phenomenon. Starting simple with the Joule Thief and a rodent coil. This is probably the easiest setup you can do. I recommend it. It's in my do-it-yourself guide linked in the description of all my videos. So this is the classic entry point into the field-driven synthetic AC. Even a small battery, or even with just a small battery, a simple transistor, and a single coil, you can produce measurable collapse events. The key is timing and field geometry. The coil must be wound in the ABHA pattern so that the field gradients are directional, right? You want to produce those two counter-rotating fields of electromagnetic energy. And what this means in layman terms is that you have one winding pattern and then a secondary interference wind that creates kind of a cross-hitch type overlap using one single bundle of wires broken up into at least 2 channels. So this will create those two counter-rotating fields. Now when the transistor switches, a forward pulse excites the field. The collapse pulse then releases energy in a highly concentrated window, which can be captured with a fast oscilloscope probe. I think, which one's mine? A Siglent SDS 1104 X-E. It's like a really, really expensive one, but you need a really high quality, high speed oscilloscope to capture these events. Now, you have to read these signals carefully, right? Don't just probe and ground the signal in a traditional sense. Use the floating probe as a float as well. You know, don't ground it. That's how you actually capture most of the field interactions. Now, I know this goes against conventional teaching, but floating the probe actually allows you to see the interactions between the back EMF and the forward. So when you ground the probe, you actually ground that out of the system and you just see these as pulses because you're not capturing the full interaction event. But it is useful to capture both, right? So you want to see a full picture of the system. Try floating the probe along with grounding it. You want to read these signals carefully. Ordinary meters will often show nothing unusual, right? Or they'll, just show you basically nothing. They average over time, right? They smooth out the short-lived collapse events. So use a fast response oscilloscope, ideally with probes that can handle microsecond pulses. Look for voltage spikes, polarity reversal, and nested harmonics on all scales. And these are the signatures of energy being reorganized by the field, not just flowing through the wire. So next, add complexity. Multi-coil ABHA systems, right? Stacking them, primary and secondary pickup coil. Connecting multiple rodent coils in specific orientations allows you to observe field alignment and coupling effects. Even with ideal electrical setups, small changes in relative orientation of these coils can create dramatically different results in efficiency. So some coils, you can use any kind of pickup coil, really. So some coils may show strong spike captures, while others may appear almost dormant. Most demonstrate one of the central ideas of synthetic AC, though, which is geometry and orientation dominate outcomes more than components' values. So for forward-driven setups, which I'm not actually accustomed to, this is probably more in the realm of Mike Does and Nathan from Old Man Builds. But for forward-driven setups, PWMs, H-bridges, ZVS drivers, these experiments push energy deliberately. But they rely on field management. For example, a pulse width modulator a PWM-driven rodent coil might be able to produce superimposed forward and backward pulses. And this could create a temporary bridge to source. So measure this with the oscilloscope. If you try it, let me know. Email me. Going to field cavitation in practice. When you drive a resonant ABHA coil at the right frequency, the electromagnetic field begins to form compression and rarefaction zones. On the micro scale, these may produce transient chaotic spikes or energy bands with a pinch point. On the macro, they output as smooth, like a sine wave. And at the normal scale, you'll see all these nested harmonics. So it's very interesting. You see chaos forming the smooth sine wave. And this is the same principle Tesla explored with high voltage impulses. What Dini captured with his H-wave circuits, it's the same thing. Energy is the same principle. Energy is not lost. It's temporarily hidden in the field structure until collapse allows the capture. And you have to capture correctly. So open circuit and lightly loaded tests. With these, try observing the coil without a significant load, right? You may see elevated voltage readings or spikes. Again, going back to the sense of when you're testing with a Joule Thief, you want to try different loads because the load acts as a capacitor itself and can change the frequency, altering the resonance. So you want to try different loads. Try a light load, try a heavier load. You never know. But this is a direct demonstration of displacement current and nested harmonic effects in action. The energy exists in the field even without continuous current. Connecting a load at the correct moment redirects this energy into usable work. And of course, always apply safety first. Even small ABHA coils can produce surprisingly high voltages during the collapse event. Always isolate your experiments, wear proper PPE, and avoid touching the live circuits directly, right? Use appropriate probes and insulation equipment. Synthetic AC experiments are safe when handled carefully, but field spikes are real and can be startling if unexpected. So to bring it all together, by now the full picture is visible. Synthetic AC is not a mystery. It's not some unexplainable fringe phenomenon. It's a predictable, repeatable framework for accessing energy during collapse events, where traditional metrics like RMS voltage or root mean square voltage or average current fails to capture what's really happening. ABHA coils, Bedini SSGs, and Tesla-style impulse systems, they all fit into this model quite neatly. Now, they may look different, but they share the same principles: geometry, timing, field primacy, and collapse-driven energy capture. So as we come to the culmination of this exploration, it is time to see synthetic AC in its full glory as a single, unified story that connects over 100 years of observation, experimentation, and theoretical insight. Most people think electricity is fully understood because it lights our homes and powers our devices. But in reality, what we see in everyday appliances represents only a tiny, thin slice of how energy behaves under very controlled, polite conditions. The moment we move outside those steady states, electricity begins to reveal its hidden character. It twists, it concentrates, it collapses, and it reorganizes in ways that classical AC-DC theory struggle to explain. Tesla glimpsed this in his high-voltage impulse experiments. Bedini discovered it empirically with the H-wave and pulse-driven battery systems. And Bearden theorized it mathematically through scalar potentials and the medium itself. Now, synthetic AC does not reinvent the rules, it reveals the layers hidden beneath. the hidden dance of energy that was always there. A mysterious and powerful lady waiting for someone to pay her attention, and rightfully so. So energy in that sense is not just physical electrons. This is perhaps the most profound shift in perspective. In ordinary AC and DC theory, we are trained to see energy as a flow of charge, a neat transfer from point A to point B. Right? You flip a switch, current flows, devices run, and we assume that's the end of the story. Now, synthetic AC asks us to look at the fields first. Right? We're peeking under the hood here. Electrons do not dictate behavior. They respond to it. In the ABBA-Roden coil variation, energy is not delivered evenly. It is concentrated during collapse events where the field reorganizes in space and time. The nested harmonics and asymmetric collapses, the hypothetical cavitation zone, all of these are not anomalies or artifacts of measurement. They are the real language of energy itself, and the coil is our translator. Every pulse we send, every carefully timed collapse we observe, every alignment of geometry and orientation is a message waiting to be unfolded, a message waiting to be decrypted. The moment of collapse is sacred. Every spike in Tesla coils, every particular H-wave Bedini recorded, every scalar effect Bearden described, all point to the same truth. The rise is preparation, but the collapse is where the energy is truly accessible. See, rise time, steady conduction, and continuous currents are just the system organizing itself. But collapse is the window where the field alignment can be intercepted and redirected. And this is where ABBA coils really shine. The asymmetric field interactions, the biharmonic interactions, the carefully orchestrated interaction between the forward and backward pulses, they all serve to preserve the dipole of the source, focus energy into nested harmonics, and allow us to extract or observe energy without violating the classical laws of physics. Every collapse event, every harmonic, every subtle misalignment teaches us more about how energy behaves when we stop assuming it's just electrons moving through your circuit. Now, nested harmonics are the heartbeat of synthetic AC. Going back to the oscilloscope, the default scale, you'll see the single signal is bouncing off of itself with secondary and tertiary nested harmonics. So these each collapse event generates a symphony of modes, layers of oscillation that stack and interfere. They amplify and cancel depending on precise alignment in space and time. In conventional inductors, higher order modes are often dampened or ignored, but in the Roden coil, we preserve them. In ABBA configuration specifically, these harmonics phase align during collapse events, concentrating energy in ways that a multimeter or ordinary oscilloscope might never even capture. So to truly observe this, we need high-speed probes, magnetic field sensors, like a Hall sensor, and multi-point voltage meters. Only then does the full orchestra reveal itself. And we want to also look at secondary effects too. The chaotic micro events, they seem to resolve into a coherent, usable energy at the macro scale in the system. And it really is a lesson in patience and observation. This is where the system rewards you the most. When you notice the timing, the geometry, and the orientation, when you notice these subtle differences. So field cavitation is where energy becomes almost alive. When we drive an ABBA coil with resonant phase managed pulses, the electromagnetic field behaves like a fluid of some sort under extreme conditions, analogous to bubble cavitation. So let me pull up the diagram. The compression zone pushes against the rarefaction zone. You can see that demonstrated in the blue and orange fields in the diagram here, but imagine them competing almost for the same space. Not really competing, they're timed, but they're taking up the same space. So, in a way, they somewhat are competing, but it's a little more complex than that. But the compression zone pushes against the rarefaction zone, creating a localized cavity where the field density temporarily drops, only to collapse again. Within this cavitation zone, energy becomes highly concentrated. You can see the middle here, the 0 point in the center. So on the micro scale, chaotic sidebands on the oscilloscope are seen as the asymmetric convergence and possible plasmoid formation might be observed here, consistent with extreme localized field interaction. So on the macro scale, the system resolves into a surprisingly smooth and predictable output, demonstrating that extreme local nonlinearity can coexist with global coherence. This cavitation zone is not technically a void, though, however, as I previously described it. It is a dynamic regulator, repeatedly compressing, releasing, and reorganizing energy. Remember, we think it might be sucking in stray electrons and ions from the environment around it. It allows the field to do work without relying solely on conduction, bridging the gap between exotic phenomenon historically observed by rodent coil pioneers in the field and repeatable modern experiments. So orientation, geometry, and timing are the instruments of this symphony. Even a few degrees of rotation, a slight shift in pulse timing, or a minor adjustment in load placement can dramatically alter results in your system. The Abha rodent coils are not passive systems. They are active participants in shaping energy flow. They respond to environmental fields, interact with nearby conductors, and sometimes appear to communicate with other coils across space. Remember, I recorded a strong magnetic field still picked up in a coil that wasn't even powered. It hadn't been powered for months. Just sitting there next to the coil that was powered, it was absorbing some of the energy just with the geometry and it just being in proximity. So, very remarkable coil. Very remarkable phenomenon, but we can explain these phenomenon under this working model. So these variations are not errors or noise. They are data points that reveal the system's sensitivity and richness. Understanding this teaches us that energy is a phenomenon of context. How the energy, or how the system, the geometry, and the pulse surrounding and the surrounding environment interact in time, basically. Classical metrics like the RMS voltage and average current capture only snapshots. They average out all the key focal points that you're going to want to be paying attention to. Synthetic AC is a movie, an unfolding story of energy in motion. Remember that. And the Abha coil lets us watch it frame by frame and break it down, see the observable effects that most coils hide. So connecting to classical physics here, it's really crucial to emphasize that the Abha coil and synthetic AC do not break Maxwell's equations or the laws of electrodynamics. What changes, as we discussed earlier, are the terms we focus on. Displacement currents, local flux gradients, field topology, and collapse timing. These are normally negligible in steady-state circuits, but dominate in collapse-driven geometry. Sensitive systems. So by observing and harnessing these terms, what was once dismissed as fringe becomes coherent, repeatable, and understandable under our synthetic AC model. And Tesla, Bedini, and Bearden were all glimpsing the same layers of physics. The Abha-Roden coil, in combination with synthetic AC type systems, lets us map it experimentally. So if you think about electricity purely in terms of moving electrons, it is very hard to see how two carefully timed DC pulses could generate what looks like an AC sine wave. It really is. So you can't really think about it like that. Electrons just don't naturally wiggle back and forth in that way with a forward and backward pulse if you're imagining electron flow as moving particles. So they would mostly move in the direction of the applied voltage, and you expect sharp step-like voltage jumps, not smooth oscillations like we see in the oscilloscope. From that viewpoint, it almost seems impossible what I'm telling you about the modalities of synthetic AC and how it works. But if you switch your frame of reference just for a moment to fields dominate instead of charges, I think it starts to click. At least with me it did. So those pulses aren't just moving electrons, right? They're disturbing the electric and magnetic fields around the conductor. And when the forward pulse hits, it establishes a field structure in space. When the backward or recovery pulse is timed correctly from the collapse event, it interacts with that existing field, causing a natural rise and fall of potential that manifests as what looks like an AC waveform. In our system, a very strong AC, or what they would call ripple, but it's not a ripple. It's not a byproduct. The sine wave isn't electrons swinging back and forth in that sense. It's the dynamic response of the fields themselves reorganizing and interacting. So this is why geometry, timing, and orientation of the field matter so much in the synthetic AC model when you're considering your own systems. Small changes in the coil shape, winding order, or pulse delay can dramatically alter the resulting waveform. We've seen that demonstrated on the oscilloscope because we have the lumen lamp, which is utilizing the same exact circuit as the lightning thief. It just has a different coil. So in other words, synthetic AC is AC in appearance, but it's fundamentally field-driven, not charge-driven. And once you make that mental switch, things like nested harmonics, collapse-driven energy, and the emergence of smooth sine-like behavior from pulsed DC systems, they all start to make intuitive sense. Now, if we come full circle here, and if we step back and look at our journey as a whole so far, the patterns do emerge. Energy exists in the fields first. Electrons are secondary. Collapse events are the gateway where energy concentrates. Nested harmonics reveal the structure of the field, and cavitation zones show us how energy can be reorganized and not lost. Now, geometry and field orientation are as important as winding. Pulse timing matters more than average current, and the environment itself is a part of the experiment. You have to remember that. So what was once hidden, ignored, or labeled fringe becomes coherent and observable under our synthetic AC model. Tesla's sparks, Bedini's H-wave, Bearden's scalar predictions, they all converge into a singular unified story told by synthetic AC and revealed through Abha-style Roden coils. So, an invitation to the listener here. This is not the end. This is an opening. Every spark, every pulse, every harmonic observed is a message from the field, waiting to be read. Whether you're a scientist or just a curious experimenter, the principles of synthetic AC offer a lens to see what is normally invisible. The Abha-Roden coil is not a generator of free energy in that sense. It is a tool to observe and interact with energy where it truly lives, in the field, in the collapse event, and geometry and in the timing of the circuit itself. So, as we conclude this chapter, we come full circle, full vision, full of possibilities. Electricity is not simply wires and electrons. It's a living phenomenon, dynamic, responsive, and extraordinarily structured. In synthetic AC, through Tesla, Bedini, and Bearden, and the ABHA experimentations, provide a framework to see, measure, and eventually harness the hidden dimension of energy. And what we've shared tonight is a foundation, a story of discovery and insight that reaches back over a century and extends into the experiments of today. And tomorrow we continue to explore applications of the coil and synthetic AC altogether, further our experiments as collaborators, and the next layer of understanding in this could be remarkable. You know, we might not have it all worked out. As I said, this is just the start. This model could be, added to. It could be changed. It could be drastically altered. If it proves, to be right in one aspect and wrong in the other, we have to progress it. And this is where you guys come in with your experimentations. So, as we move into the final part of tonight's podcast, and as we bring everything together, let's step back and look at the full picture. Synthetic AC, ABHA rodent coils, collapse-driven energy capture, nested harmonics, forward-driven pulsed systems, they're not all isolated curiosities. They are different faces of the same underlying principle. That energy transfer is nonlinear, transient, and geometrically structured systems is dominated by fields, timing, and orientation, not just moving charges, right? So most people think of electricity as being fully understood in that sense. We go back to the analogy of, or we go back to the idea of flipping a switch. The light turns on, the phone charges, and the world keeps running. But from the outside, it looks like and from the outside, that does look like a solved problem. But the understanding, that understanding only works under very specific conditions. The moment systems operate outside those ideal conditions, during the rapid collapse events, the field reorganizations, everything we thought we knew becomes insufficient. And that's where synthetic AC really thrives. And it's where some of the most fascinating behaviors of electrical systems really emerge, in my opinion. And Tesla, Bedini, and Bearden were all chasing the same insight from different angles here. Tesla saw fields dominate before charges could catch up. Bedini captured energy during collapse windows that classical models treated as loss. And Bearden described a medium and potential-based framework where energy could propagate without conventional current paths. Synthetic AC unites these into a coherent, experimentally navigable framework that everybody can apply to their systems today. And it's not just theoretical, right? The ABHA coil shows this beautifully in practice with our lightning thief system. Its asymmetric biharmonic winding preserves higher order modes, amplify collapse timing, and produce measurable effects that actually appear impossible to those only looking at currents and charge-dominant systems. So in that sense, pulse DC, when viewing through the field lens, naturally gives rise to waveforms that mimic AC-like behavior. Not because electrons magically wiggle back and forth, but because interacting fields of potential reorganize dynamically. Geometry, pulse timing, and orientation align the fields, producing coherent energy transfer that is visible, measurable, and repeatable. Forward-driven systems like ZVS drivers show another side of that coin. These systems push energy into the load while carefully managing reactive components. Instead of letting the backward energy from the collapse fight against itself or dissipate, the system recycles that energy into the field, reinforcing the next forward pulse. The dipole, in this sense, is slightly preserved. Efficiency improves, and the system behaves optimally, all while remaining fully under unity, fully respecting conservation laws. Remember, this is not over unity, it's intelligent field guidance. So field orientation and geometry are crucial here. Tiny differences in coil alignment, winding patterns, or load placement can dramatically change the waveform and the captured energy. So what might look like replication failure is often simply misaligned field interaction, not broken theory. Nested harmonics phase align only when the structure, timing, and field orientation are correct in your system, and when they do, energy concentration spike occurs, revealing the underlying field-driven mechanism in your system. This kind of brings us full circle, again, with the synthetic AC. It doesn't overthrow classical physics. It extends it. It's an extension. Synthetic AC, it highlights terms in Maxwell's equations that are usually just ignored or neglected. Displacement currents, transient gradients, and geometric boundary effects. It shows that when these terms dominate, the system behaves in ways that appear strange to conventional engineers, but they are not violations. They are natural consequences of the field-first, collapse-driven dynamic. So what does this all mean for the curious, for the experimenter, for the average everyday thinker? Well, it means there is another layer of electrical reality that is rarely explored in textbooks, hidden in the interplay of geometry, timing, and fields. Systems that look fringe or anomalous suddenly start to make sense under this model. Tesla's wireless experiments, Bedini's H-wave charging systems, and Bearden's scalar potential models are no longer mysterious. They are predictable, observable, and navigable when seen through the synthetic AC lens. And perhaps, most importantly, it shows that the future of electrical experimentation is not just about brute force. It's about coaxing fields into the proper geometry and orientation, right? Orchestrating the collapse and aligning the geometry. It's about listening to the hidden symphony of energy that classical models can only hint at. Synthetic AC in that sense is not a gadget or a gimmick. The ABHA coil is not a free energy machine. They are windows into the dynamics of energy that exist all around us, that are rarely explored or rarely ever seen in traditional systems. So when approached with careful observation, rigorous timing, and thoughtful geometry, these systems reveal patterns, behaviors, and opportunities that were hiding in plain sight all along for us to discover. And that is where this episode ends, with a picture of electricity not as a mundane back and forth of electrons, but as a living, dynamic, field-driven phenomenon, one that rewards the patient observer with care, and it rewards the patient observer, the careful experimenter, and the tinkerer, willing to look beyond the wires, beyond the meters, and beyond conventional models. This is synthetic AC. This is the ABHA Rodin coil. This is a glimpse into what is possible with proper geometry and timing and field orientation. Hey, what's going on, Victor Sears? Magneto Frico says, great presentation, Ben. Well spoken. Thank you, Magneto. I appreciate your input and support. All the love and support is much appreciated. So Victor Sears says, have you seen the U.S. Navy work on transformer spike recovery? No. Send that to me. If you have any information, you can send it to me, Victor Sears, BeneficenceTV@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat. We're getting ready to wrap things up because my voice is toast. You could tell. I'm almost about to lose my voice, so I'm just about to chill and play some video games at this point because I am toast. We had how going on over 2 hours now. Yeah. Let me put that in the chat for you, Vic. All right, so I appreciate everybody for tuning in for this episode of Benefactor's Guide to Free Energy Devices. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this content with those who would appreciate it. I really appreciate all the love and support, all the people in chat chiming in. It's great to see you guys here. It's great to see Victor Sears here in the chat. Magneto Frico, I haven't seen you for a minute. It's great to see you back, friend. Mike Does, always a pleasure. We're your biggest fans, Mike, of course. And with that, we're going to end the live stream. I wish you all a happy evening. Peace.
In the depths of hidden files, trapped inside the secret circuits, unraveling through the miles, oh, truth was masked by golden curtains.